Our next speaker is Daniel Teeter, president of Love at Peace Ministries on managing power and abuse dynamics.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody today. Christian Conciliation, as my fellow panelists Ken and Candy, Brian have already shared, is a wonderful and effective tool that assumes a dynamic of mutuality, equality, neutrality, and joint responsibility to help resolve conflicts in a biblical way. Yet, much like other models in alternative dispute resolution, when there is a significant power imbalance, a good tool that effectively addresses mutual conflict can actually become an instrument of potential harm. Therefore, I argue that it's unwise to use standard conciliation methods when there are significant power imbalances due to abuse, because it puts victims at risk for re-traumatization. I believe it's the conciliator's professional responsibility to grow in their awareness of power dynamics within a conciliation process in order to avoid putting vulnerable parties in harm's way. Because power dynamics exist in all social relationships, power inequities and imbalances occur frequently. These imbalances are often natural and morally neutral. Power is not inherently evil, and it can be the source of great good if it's motivated and constrained by love. And furthermore, as some have argued, having an exactly equal power dynamic in a mediation isn't necessarily required for it to be fair, nor is this entirely possible because of the subjective experience of interpersonal power. Moreover, having a stronger party doesn't inherently mean they will abuse that power. Yet, there are power imbalances that can create a context for harm if left unnoticed and unchecked. Mediators, unfortunately, can inadvertently exacerbate an existing power imbalance by imposing impartiality on an unlevel playing field. In most extreme cases, like abuse, it's not simply that there is an imbalance of power, but the intentional exploitation of that power imbalance to expand the control of the abuser that comes at the expense of the victim. A litmus test for assessing power imbalances is how this imbalance affects a party's ability to self-determine. This can be observed by examining a party's capacity for meaningful action in their negotiation interests. However, it also can be observed through a party's experience of fear, retaliation, punishment, or threat. I recommend a three-pronged approach for conciliators in developing a more helpful path forward to address power imbalances caused by abuse. First, a conciliator must assess power dynamics wisely. This means starting with a foundational understanding that there are power dynamics in every conciliation. I recommend building in a standard set of questions as a mediator conceptualizes the case, whether it's through an intake process or in their actual case conceptualization model. I also advocate strongly to use screening tools that will surface these power dynamics, particularly ones that are imbalanced due to abuse. Once you've identified power imbalances that are in play, I recommend that you accommodate these power differentials appropriately. Accommodation of power differentials starts by identifying and seeing the vulnerability of the party most at risk. It means informing parties of the risks of participating in a conciliation process, informed consent, particularly if an abusive individual or group does not acknowledge their abusive behavior. It also will mean changing the format of the conciliation process entirely to better reflect the nature of the harm that has occurred. For example, a restorative justice model could be one approach. Lastly, I recommend that conciliators advocate for justice, which might sound a bit odd, given that we are to remain neutral in the sense that we are unbiased, fair, and do not demonstrate favoritism and provide a consistent process. However, I believe it's legitimate to consider that neutrality creates complicity to harm when injustice and oppression are occurring. So advocacy begins by shifting the focus from conflict-oriented reconciliation to naming and identifying the abusive patterns and constructing a trauma-informed process that is victim-centered. So although cases involving power imbalances are quite complex and challenging to navigate effectively, and certainly I could say much more, as I'm sure all of us could, I believe that with the proper approach, we can successfully serve victims by adopting best practices that empower them to flourish. I appreciate the time, and thank you for having me.